Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining my channel today, and I hope that you've had a really good weekend. I am going to be doing a full interpretation of Ted Bundy's natal chart. Somebody asked me to do this, and I'm really glad that I did. I was thinking initially that, his natal chart has been done by a couple of different astrologers on YouTube, but I think that this one you're really going to like. This one is kind of chock full of his inner psychology. I think there's some question about different identities he could have had, fragmentation. So I'm going to go into all of that. I did do a little bit of research in preparation for this, and I bring up different identities because I watched a documentary on HBO and I've seen it before. I really love it. It's called Crazy Not Insane. And this forensic psychiatrist, what's her name? I can't remember it right now, but she had interviewed Ted Bundy and she had the theory that he had dissociative identity disorder. So if you've heard of multiple personality disorder from the book Sybil or the movie Sybil, that's what that means. Of course, it's now termed dissociative identity disorder. So I am going to touch on that when I read his chart. I also read a book that Anne Rule wrote called The Stranger Beside Me. And it's actually kind of a memoir about her time in working with Ted Bundy at a crisis call center. So that is really interesting because she knew him as a friend and a confidant. So again, it's like this guy with this complete double life. So I'm going to also point out a lot of the aspects in here that tell us about that. So this is going to be kind of a long video because I'm going to go through a lot of information. Um, I will preface this video by saying there could be a trigger warning here because I'm going to go more into some morbid, kind of grisly details than I usually do, given the crimes that he committed. So just putting that out there before I start. So when I first saw this chart a few days ago, one of the first things that jumped out to me was that he has quite a few planets that look like they're conjunct the cusp houses. And if you watched the video I did on the progressed chart of Nick Reiner, it's the chart that I progressed. That showed up. So I talked about it in my that video that when someone has planets, quite a few planets, in this case, like we see Uranus on the cusp here, Neptune, Jupiter, Venus, the moon. So when you have quite a few planets like this that are really bordering the cusp houses, this tells me that this is someone who's not afraid to go out of bounds. They can be very much into risk taking, kind of a daredevil. This is not someone who's necessarily going to be complacent and just, sit through life doing nothing. They're more rebellious. They want to step out of bounds. They want to step into the next house, so to speak. The next thing that really caught my attention is that he has a lot of fire, as you can probably see with all this Sagittarius and Leo. It makes up, I think, at least half his chart. And then, if not a little more, and he has no planets in Earth. He has this little part of fortune in Virgo, but he doesn't have any personal planets in Earth. And so one of the themes I'm going to talk about in this video is how much I think he never really was in touch with consequences. That might not surprise a lot of people, but that is, when I look at these charts of these perpetrators, these criminals, what I'm thinking about is how did they get to be the way that they are? I'm not as interested in the crime itself. I'm really interested in what does astrology tell us about how these people could do what they did. So I'm thinking that with no earth and a lot of fire, he really may not be in touch with the practical side of life and thinking about consequences. But there's all this fire energy he has to use up. And fire tends to be like, let's just move on. Let's just move on to the next thing. Fire tends to jump into action. It doesn't really think about consequences. It thinks this energy is just going to get burned up. We might as well use it up. Now, if you are watching this and you have no planets in Earth, that's quite possible. You have a lot in fire. In no way am I saying that you're a bad person or that you could be capable of committing criminal acts. I'm just, it's just one of the very many clues here that tell us a little bit about his thinking, his personality. It doesn't necessarily mean someone has no moral compass. So I just want to put that out there. The next thing I want to talk about is that Pisces rules his eighth house. So the eighth house has to do with secrets, with death, and it has to do with attitudes about sex. So interestingly, Neptune rules Pisces, and Neptune is in the second house here. So one of the things this tells me is that sex was, or it could have been related to ownership for him. So I know, I'm thinking or I'm assuming people watching this know a lot about his crime, but if you don't know, he was a serial killer. He tended to kill women and then basically have sex with their bodies, their corpses. And so I think that's really interesting that the Neptune in the second ruling the eighth house says something to us about him wanting to own. He wants to own these women as though they're sexual objects to him. Um, Also, yeah, I mean, with the death, because the eighth house is the house of death, he not only wanted to end these girls' lives, he wanted to own them. They became his possessions. I also read that after he killed them, he bathed them, he put makeup on them, and he painted their fingernails. So the Pisces, of course, that just speaks to this fantasy, the romance of being in love with these women. He wanted to make pretend they were real or alive somehow when they were truly just objects to him. They were dead. Um, so again, because the ruler of the eighth is in the second house, they became more like objects, and he kind of made them like his dolls. I also wonder if he kind of made them his family or he began to see them as family in some really distorted way, and I'm going to talk about that now. So as we can see here, he has a super, super packed fourth house, and the fourth house has to do with home and family. So my interpretation of his packed fourth house means this is a man that wanted to put roots down in some way. But Ted Bundy also is someone that had no idea where he came from. He didn't know who his father was, and he thought his sister was actually his mother. So if you don't know the story, and Ted Bundy's mother had him, I think, as a teenager at a very young age. And this was back in the day. So she was placed into a home for unwed mothers. She was forced to give him up. So I think he spent like 1 or 2 weeks in an orphanage or something. Then she got him back. But her father demanded for some reason that Ted Bundy think that he was his father, even though he was really his grandfather. And he grew up believing that his mother was actually his sister. Now, he apparently had suspicions of this all along. So when he was an adult, he went to go look at his birth certificate and he found out the truth. But for all these years, he didn't really know what the deal was. So I'm going back to this fourth house stuff. Like, I was thinking to myself, how can he put down his roots when he doesn't even know who he is or where he came from? But he has all these planets in the fourth, so he feels a need to do it somehow. He has to use this energy in some way. So, one of the ways I see him using this energy is he wound up literally placing some of these women into the ground once he killed them. So, the fourth house also represents agriculture, farming. Um, he also typically broke into their homes to kill them. So he used the Mars conjunct Moon energy, which I'm going to talk a lot about. Ooh, wow. I'm going to talk about a lot in the video about Mars Moon conjunction, but a lot of anger, a lot of rage at women, and he chose to exercise this energy in the home by breaking into the home, killing them there. He also kept some of their skulls in his home. And he said that he burned some of the victims' skulls in his fireplace. So, of course, all this fire, Sag energy, he's using the energy in that way. He also commented, I thought this was really fascinating, that he kept their remains because when you work hard to do something right, you don't want to forget it. Um, to me, this really has to do with Saturn and Leo, actually. Saturn is all about hard work. So he took pride in the work that he did to cut these women up, essentially. He didn't want that to change or to disappear. Also represents the fixed energy of Leo. Also in this chart, Saturn rules his sixth house, and sixth house is about work, daily routine. So he takes pride in it, again with the Leo. Taurus is on his midheaven, and so Venus in Scorpio rules that. Because it's Scorpio, it's very much like I've really given a lot of attention to detail here. I've worked really hard at it. I've done some really meticulous work here. I'm proud of it. Some other really interesting clues about his chart as it relates to his family. So Saturn represents the father. This is in his 12th house. The 12th house is a Pisces house in general. So it's quite fuzzy. The picture is very fuzzy. You don't really know what's going on. So he doesn't know who his father is or where his father is. The 12th house, oh, his moon, this moon in Sag also is ruling the 12th house because it's Cancer rules the 12th house here. So he doesn't know his mom either. The moon represents the mother. So it's like, where's my mom? Who is she? To take it even a step further, he has Libra ruling his third house. Third house is the house of siblings. So again, Venus also rules Libra, it doesn't just rule Taurus. So we have Venus at 20 degrees Scorpio. There's a lot in retrograde here too, which I didn't really realize. So I use this chart on my computer, but I actually use AstroGold on my phone. So I don't think it really comes up on AstroGold. But anyway, I'm seeing this is in retrograde, Mercury is in retrograde, Pluto, so Saturn, Uranus, there's a lot in retrograde. So if you want to comment on that, let me know in the chart. What do you think of that? So Venus is in at 20 Scorpio, and then we have the moon at 17 Sag. So Venus and the moon are making a semi-sextile. Because Venus rules the third house of siblings, this reminds me for him of like, are you my mom or are you my sister? Again, he had an inkling up till he found out that throughout his childhood that his sister was in fact his mom. And a semi-sextile is an aspect I really don't go into much, but a semi-sextile is a bit like an inconjunct, so it causes a bit of friction, irritation. It doesn't fit, it doesn't feel comfortable. Um, so these planets are within a 7-degree orb of each other because this is 20, this is 17, but they're neighboring planets because this is in Scorpio, this is in Sag, it comes right before Sag, so that's what makes it a semi-sextile. So you may be wondering, as I did, well, if he has all this energy in the fourth house and he wanted to build roots, why didn't he just get married and have a family? So for me, this is where I'm going to start to go into the inner fragmentation of Ted Bundy. This was a rather complex person. He had some pretty distinct sides to him that were kind of split off from each other, and there was like a real push-pull for him. A lot of it has to do with this Uranus at the top of his chart. I'm sure everyone's also seeing the mutability, all the Sagittarius and then the Gemini. So signs that are mutable tend to kind of go whichever way the wind blows, so to speak. They're very non-linear. They can go in any direction. It's much more flexible than the fixed signs that are staying where they are, or the cardinal signs that have a direction, they have a goal, they have a linear path. Um, and so let's just take Venus conjunct or in conjunct Uranus, for instance. So first of all, what does Venus in Scorpio mean? So Venus in Scorpio wants depth. Love here is not casual. It's a very romantic bond. It feels emotionally charged. It can feel transformative. Um, there could also be a real instinct to hold on once you feel attached. So I'm wondering if this may be why he kept going back and having sex with the corpses. There are much better ways to use this energy, by the way, if you haven't considered that. Um, but yeah, there's this push and pull for him in terms of romance and relationships. So Venus in Scorpio wants depth and long-term connection, but Uranus and Gemini wants freedom and the space to be themselves. Also, Uranus rules his seventh house of partnerships, relationships. So this could already be someone that wants a relationship that's a bit unconventional, or they could really need a relationship that allows them to have more freedom than the average person, let's say. But ultimately, Uranus and Gemini does tell me he did not, I mean, there's all this indication he was so private, but he also really wanted to get outside of the home. Uranus is in Gemini, so he wanted to get outside of the home, learn as much as he could, and communicate with others in a public-facing way. Whereas Venus in the fourth here, especially in Scorpio, it wants to keep the home life private. It wants to keep secrets in the home, and it wants to keep home life and work life separate. I will also say Venus in conjunct Uranus, also Moon opposing Uranus, which he has. This is like, or this can tend to be like you love the chase, but then once you have the relationship, you don't want it anymore. So as I read in Anne Rule's book, Ted had several long-term on again, off again relationships with women, and he would be madly in love with them, but when they were only when they were emotionally unavailable. When they got closer, he would abruptly pull away and would give no explanation. So that could really be the essence of these aspects. And I don't want to sound apathetic here, but I think, again, because I'm thinking about Pisces in the eighth house and this Neptune in the second, all the stuff in the fourth, and other stuff I'm going to get into. I think he found this strategy to have both of the energies here because he killed these females, they became objects to him. So now he owns them. There's really nothing at stake. They don't see him. They're not gonna, there's no way he's gonna expose himself and his secrets. And so he can completely come and go as he pleases, and they don't even see him at all. So, obviously not everyone with this aspect would do what he did. But if you're watching this and you have someone in your life who has avoidant attachment issues, which millions of people on the planet do, you may want to check and see if they have this aspect in their natal chart, Venus in conjunct Uranus or Moon opposing Uranus. There's a lot of other stuff in astrology that could also point to avoidant attachment, but those are some real big ones. Um, I'm also thinking because this is Uranus and Gemini, I kind of feel like if Ted Bundy were alive now, he would have a field day with the internet. This is someone who would totally, I think, have become addicted to pornography and like OnlyFans and cam girls. And, I think he would have been totally into the electronic aspect, feeling like he owned these women, he had power over them, so on and so forth. Now, Very similarly with this, he has Mercury in the fourth. I'm going to do that over. He has Mercury and Scorpio in the fourth, also making an inconjunct to Uranus. So again, we could surmise that he longs for a deeply private home life with a woman or a corpse, but that his career and his public persona could abruptly change the way he's able to show up for love in his life. Venus, by the way, Venus conjunct Mercury, these people are very, very good at like letting people know I can keep a secret. He can get people to confess their secrets to him quite easily. So if he used this energy to his benefit, he could have become a good counselor or even a priest, I think. There are other people, there's hundreds of people out there that have this exact birth chart, and I can guarantee you that, probably none of them or very, very few of them have done what Ted Bundy did. So it's all in the way you use the energy. So Mercury in conjunct Uranus in general means that his thoughts move very, very quickly and his brain jumps between ideas faster than he can even communicate. I think this is where we start to see some of the fragmentation. So with his thinking. So for instance, he's not really being aware that A will lead to B and B will lead to C. This is someone who I would say he's aware of what he's doing, um, but he's just not in touch with the aftermath, potential consequences. Uh, Other stuff about this aspect, he's mentally restless, he's easily distracted. His speech or his writing could be, very inconsistent. He feels really pulled in two different directions. He wants the comfort of old thought patterns, but he also wants something new. And because Mercury is in Scorpio, I think we have this deep probing thinking, which clashes with this very fast, scattered thinking. So he can swing between this like intense concentration and then feeling all over the place. Also, he may be thinking obsessively and deeply about something for days, but then when he speaks or he communicates, it comes out wonky or just too abrupt. I think a very simple way to surmise this aspect for him is that his thinking was just really weird. It was just really off. So I'm going to go to Pluto now. Pluto, I think for me, I think Uranus is a key player. Pluto definitely is. Pluto is making a square to Jupiter, but it's also making a trine to Mars. And these planets are all at 13 degrees. So, and I know Mars is conjunct Moon, which I'm going to get into, but if we just look at these planets, these three planets, Pluto is making a trine to Mars. So this is going to come very easily, but it's making a square to Jupiter. So to me, this combination indicates a level of megalomania. So this is someone who I think really believes he is above other people, which I'm sure doesn't surprise anyone. And he does have this obsessive need for power. That probably doesn't surprise anyone either, but it's these aspects that I just have to mention because they are the aspects that tell us this story. They tell us, yes, this is someone who has this obsessive hunger to feel powerful. The Mars conjunct Moon mean it has to do something with his mother, something with women, I think. So I'm going to go into that now. So Moon conjunct Mars in Sag. And for those newer to astrology, the moon represents our feelings, our emotions, and then Mars is how we take action. So when you have a moon Mars conjunction, your feelings and your actions are fused together. The moon also represents mother. So moon Mars indicates there could be a real anger towards your mother or towards women in general. Someone could easily displace rage for a maternal figure towards women in the world. And with Moon Mars, you don't just feel, you act, especially because this is in fire. It's going to be very, very fast. This is someone who has a hot temper. Emotions are going to come up very, very intensely and very quickly. Um, Someone with Moon conjunct Mars is also very sensitive. If they feel criticized, slighted, or rejected, they can become vicious or vindictive. So that goes back to his mom, because I believe his mother, well, first of all, she wasn't honest with him, and he has a lot of Scorpio. He really wants the truth. He values the truth. So she wasn't honest with him. She didn't take accountability, but I also read she was quite emotionally cold towards him. Just taking a sip of water. And I mean, I think again, she did leave him. There was this very, very early detachment as an infant. So, you have this, I think if he feels in any way rejected by a woman, it gets displaced and he gets very rageful. Interestingly, Moon Mars in the fourth house, there can really be like a fierce protectiveness over his family, even if you have a horribly abusive childhood, which I think he kind of did. And so, again, I think that's why he displaces the anger. It's not safe for him to be angry with his mom. Also, home or private places tend to be where you express your emotions most outwardly. Only for him, I think it was in other people's homes, right? Um it was when he broke into the homes and killed the women. Also, something I read was that when he was 3 years old, his grandmother or his aunt said that she woke up and she saw him standing in the bedroom or over her bed with knives. So obviously the rage came very early on in his life. But he didn't do anything with it. He stood there with it. So um, but yeah, I think this again, there's all this privacy. So I think again, this speaks to this double persona, and he has Leo on his ascendant, which I know people see. So, he's able to be very charming, guy next door. He's able to present as this like really lovable, adorable, handsome guy when deep down he's holding all these secrets. And again, Moon Mars opposing Uranus. I know I touched on this already, but this is a highly electric and reactive combination. So, as I said, Mars conjunct Moon in fire, it's really fast, it's really hot temper, but the fact that it's opposing Uranus is going to make it worse because it's going to make him hair triggered. He's going to flip on a dime. By the way, it's no coincidence. I think he died in the electric chair. I don't know if lethal injection was a method of execution when he was executed, but it's a really telling way for him to go out by being electrocuted because he has this aspect. So this does show early disruption or attachment issues related to family, so that's having to be separated from his mom. Um, he could have definitely had authority figures in his life who were erratic, absent. So I talked about that. His mom was quite emotionally absent. Um, this aspect could also mean, which I think this did happen from what I read, he had these sudden career shifts. And there may also be a pattern of abrupt separations from home and work. This is someone whose nervous system is really wired for rapid response. So again, another reason I think he could be a really great crisis counselor, which he did for a while. But he's also someone who's going to want to have a career where he can stand up for what's right, Sagittarius, and he can stand up for the truth. So again, he went into law, he went into politics, stuff like that. Now, a real problem I see for him is that Jupiter and Mars are in mutual reception with one another. So we've seen this in a lot of charts I've done. This isn't that uncommon, but basically what this means is that Jupiter is in Scorpio here. Scorpio is ruled by Mars, but Mars is in Sag. So it goes back to Jupiter because Jupiter rules Sagittarius. So these two planets are pinging back and forth between each other, and they are the final dispositors in his chart. What that means is they head up the hierarchy of the rulership. So all the planets are talking in a line. It's like playing telephone, and the telephone winds up back to these two guys. So this is very significant for him. Jupiter is going to just expand all of this fiery energy and emotion. And again, because it's opposing Uranus, like I talked about, this makes him a loose cannon. And then it pulls in the Pluto because Pluto is making aspects to both Jupiter and Mars, again, at the exact same degree at 13. So we can include the Pluto, and it brings us back to that megalomania. He wants power so badly, but he doesn't want to do it in the regular way of running for office or making $1 million. He does have Uranus in the 10th house. He wants to do something unusual. This hunger for power becomes combined with his Moon Mars combo, which is literally rage against women. And because it is square Jupiter, it just takes that rage to the next level. Now, he does have Saturn conjunct Pluto, sorry. So this also tells me this is someone who was very good at building and planning for a way to have power. He had a lot of fantasies about power. This is in Leo, like I said before, so we can surmise that he thinks he's a king. This is someone that feels he's a king. Leo's also on his ascendant. So he's building his throne, he's building his kingdom, or in this case, his skull collection. He is obsessed with planning to have power in this very secretive, behind the scenes way. And Pluto means the end of things, it means destruction. So, in a sense, he is using this energy to become methodical about ending the lives of these women for his own benefit. The fact that this is in his 12th house is very, very powerful for me. So when the energy is used for good, this again, I keep saying it, this could make someone a really great psychologist, crisis counselor, a good priest. He really does have the ability to sit with someone in crisis in their darkest hour and to guide them. But when this energy is not well integrated, someone can have a real capacity to have secrets. I mean, he already has so much secrecy with Scorpio in the fourth house. Um, and I think he feels he can really only gain power in secrecy. The Leo energy is important here because he wants to be deeply admired and seen, but because it's in the 12th house, it goes underground for him. He has a real rage about not feeling seen and chosen and special by his mother, by family. But like I talked about before, he has to keep it in the home. He has to keep it private. He has to keep it locked up. So, the power has to be taken in secret. And then, of course, that goes back to the split between his outer persona, how he comes off to the rest of the world, and this private inner sanctum that's obsessed with power and fantasy and sex. Um, you know, I I hope I'm not beating a dead horse, but I believe that psychologically underneath the rage, that Ted had an extreme fear of women. Women scared him. What was the best way for him to not get scared? Well, if he's got a bunch of dead ones in the basement, what woman is going to scare him? It was a way for him to get control over this fear that he has. He came up with a strategy that allowed him to deal with something that was overwhelming for him. And again, I want to say, I mean, there's probably millions and millions of people and men out there that are scared of women. Maybe they make different choices. They don't date, they're single, who knows? But it's all in the way you use the energy. And hopefully, I've given you already a really good read on the aspects he has that kind of make up why he did what he did. Um, I also want to say that with Pluto, I've already kind of touched on this, but with Pluto making a trine to the Mars and Moon, it's like being in touch with your emotions while you have a crossbow. So the feeling is so aggressive and so intense that I think it bypasses his ability to be in touch with it and just slow down. Also, again, I'm going to bring up the fire. It's so hot and it's so quick. He's feeling so intensely that he must do something about it. And it's like a brush fire. It just spreads and spreads and spreads. Another thing I want to point out, some of you may have already noticed, he does have North Node in Gemini in the 10th house as well. So as much as he wants to keep all this under wraps, I don't think that the 10th house would have ever allowed him to do that. His life path, his North Node, it's at the top of his chart. And it's in Gemini. He wants to tell a story. And his story got out. He also has Moon and Sag. Moon and Sag also wants to tell a story. So it makes me feel like everything he saved of these women, yeah, I mean, it was for his pleasure, it was for his story, but I feel like it was something he wanted to tell the world. And again, that's where this disconnect comes in. There's kind of a disconnect for him about how the world would react to that story. Again, he wasn't thinking about the consequences of things. The last thing I'm going to bring up, and I tend to do this, I haven't brought up his son at all. So his son is the last thing I'm going to bring up. And I'm bringing it up because this is where I think some disassociation comes in. If we want to look at this chart and say, does he have, dissociative identity disorder or some kind of dissociative state he goes into? I think this is to me what kind of tells me that that might be the case because the sun is really only making one aspect, and it's to Saturn. It's making a trine, which is nice, but the Saturn is in retrograde and it's in the 12th house. So he's not going to really easily have access to it. So the sun is really kind of on its own here. Um, okay, yeah, I was going to say it. Some people could say it's conjunct his south node. I'm not going to count it because it's not. I always put things in a 7-degree orb. This is not, I think this is 8. Um, so, so the sun is only making this one aspect. It's kind of hidden. So the sun is making no connection to personal planets. It's making no connection to Venus, Mercury, the moon, Mars. And so it's like he's responsible in terms of showing up for work, but when he gets home and he's feeling that moon Mars, he's so mad. I don't think he's even thinking about work. That other part of himself goes out the window. And I think he almost sees it like, oh, that Sagittarius guy, oh, Sun in Sagittarius, like who is he? I think that plus the Uranus aspects I already talked about, the inconjuncts, the oppositions, to me, all of that makes for this very fragmented person. And I think, again, the sun making real no aspects, his identity is kind of, it's sort of split apart from the rest of him. So I hope this video was enjoyable. I know it was very long-winded, but there was a lot to get to, and I wanted to really make my research pay off. So, with the book that I read and the movie, so hopefully you enjoyed this and it all made sense. There's stuff that I'm sure I'm missing, like always, so please feel free to comment. Let me know what you think about all the planets in retrograde because I didn't really bring that up. I didn't even really see it until I saw this chart on Sirius on my computer. So, please let me know what you think about that. Let me know what you think of this chart. If you're interested in true crime in the media, you're interested in astrology, you're interested in learning what we can learn from astrology, about what makes criminals do what they do. Please subscribe to this channel. Stay tuned for my next video, and thank you so much, as always, for watching.